Mark these three. They are all that give shape, all that lie beneath the surface of the world. These three, they are the bones of history. Sister of cold nights, betrayal meets your dawn. You chose to trust the knife, even as it found your heart. Draconis, blood of Tiam, darkness was made to embrace your soul. And these chains that now hold you, they are of your own fashioning. Krull, yours was the path the sleeping goddess chose 1,000 and more years ago. And she sleeps still, even as you awaken. The time has come, Ancient One, to once more walk among the mortals and make of your grief the sweetest gift.
This is Memories of Ice Chapter 4. Let's get into it. Chapter 4 picks up with some of our favorites, and we're going to do the regular summary analysis first, and then I'll tell you when to get out if you're a newbie, so that we can talk about the lots and lots of spoilery implications in this chapter. But we pick up with Gruntle, Stani, Harlow, and my boy Buke. I love Buke. For some reason, I think of Buke as kind of like the Bolt of Deadhouse Gates, right? Because he's got that kind of like irreverent crankiness, the elder statesman kind of quality. And this is the guy who basically entire family died in a fire while he was like out back in the alley, passed out drunk. And so that's the only reason why he's alive. And his whole family is dead, and so he feels like crap about it, and his whole like mission in life is like be this guard, go out in a blaze of glory to try and like honor his, family's death and find some meaning doing something good by like taking out brigands or criminals or whatever. He doesn't drink anymore and is just out to like be a crazy Batman type vigilante to try and make up for all this pain that he is feeling that'll never go away.
I'm not crying, you're crying!
He also just kind of secretly wants to die too, right? So he's hoping that while he's doing all this, that eventually one of these people will take him out. That's why he takes this job with Bauchelain and Korbal Broach, who he wants to kill. Korbal Broach in particular, who he's linked to all of these murders that have been happening back in Darujistan, and he knows that it's Korbal Broach, and he's like looking forward to the opportunity to take him down. We find out also that Stani is like sweet on Buke, like she likes that nobility and the fact that he's like mourning his family and thinks he needs to like get over it, and she's there for it, right? And she wants to hook up and whatever. There's like a lot of hilarious banter too within the crew, right? So that's why Gruntle, Stani, Harlow, that's a dope little friend group that I love that banter. We also find out that Gruntle used to have like a sweethearted chick who he was like hoping to marry, but then he like went away on a mission or for work or whatever, and came back and the chick had totally just bailed out on him. Poor Gruntle.
I think someone needs a hug.
Then we go back to the Bridgeburners, right? And we start with Quick Ben, who's there visiting this like 10S witch, who is basically like a witch of the Warren that's like associated with Burn. And Quick Ben is obviously like freaked out from all the stuff that we talked about last time with the infection of Burn and all of that stuff. And so he's there to kind of get the lowdown on this kind of broader undercurrent that's going on in the background of this conflict, that the actual like human war that they're doing right now. And she tells him that like Burn is the sleeping goddess, and that like this reality that we're living in is kind of like the manifestation of Burn's dream, right? And so she's infected. Dreams can become nightmares, hence all this like war and chaos and famine and convergence all happening at once. And that is kind of the tale of the tape, and why Ben basically tries to recruit her and says, well, a lot about this stuff, and there's we're on a timeline here according to those beings that were like propping up her veins or whatever that we saw before. Will you help me? She agrees, and so he gives her like one of those little rocks that we saw Picker use at the very beginning so that he can call on her down the road. I think it's also the same kind of rock communication device thing that he gives Callum in Deadhouse Gates to be able to reach him when he was on the ship that one time, his quote unquote shaved knuckle in the hole. And then he kind of goes back to camp to collect himself, Ganos, I think Mallet goes, and Spindle goes as well. The two mages, right, go with Quick and Ganos back to the camp because they're going to take part in this giant like parlay that's happening essentially. We also get a cameo in this chapter from for the first time, I think, from Spindle's shirt, which is woven from his mom's hair and super nasty, but almost a character in and of itself. And it's dope because it's like that's what's tied to his sorcery. It's like he has a warren, but then he like draws on his mom's nasty, greasy hair that he wears as a shirt. Spindle's a dope character.
You disgust me. Go on.
We also get to see Spindle's warren for the first time, which like sends every animal within like, a certain distance totally freaking out. Mallet gives us a little bit of background and says that he senses some like super gnarly power there coming from Silver Fox. Like she might be the most powerful person in this encampment, and he thinks it might be Talon Imass. We get a little bit of Ganos on the way there too, thinking about his family and the cull of the nobles and his sister Tavor, who he seems to like revere in a way. Like clearly they have this really fraught relationship, but he has confidence, I guess, that she'll do the right thing when it comes to this purge and taking care of the family and all that. But Dujek actually tells Ganos, like, yeah, actually she sent your other sister to the Odotarl mines that we saw back in Deadhouse Gates, right? And so I think Dujek does a little bit of trying to like justify, and he's like, oh, I'm sure she'll go and rescue her eventually. And Ganos is like, yeah, unless that like makes her look bad, in which case she won't.
That's cold blooded.
We get a whole interaction with Whiskey Jack and Ganos where, he's like, dude, what's up with you, bro? He's like, all the mages and stuff sense something really weird going on with you. And he tells him about how he was there when Animander Rake killed the Hounds, and that he touched blood, and that he has like all of this crazy hound blood coursing through him now as well. He tells him how he went into Rake's sword and how he like freed these hounds and they jumped into this hole, and he doesn't know what happened to him. And Whiskey Jack's like, yeah, all of that shit is super nuts, but there's something else going on as well.
Tell me!
He really like gets on Ganos' butt about Silver Fox, and he's like, dude, you need to do this because we need Silver Fox. She's like a kid, and we got to like protect this kid or whatever, but also she's going to be commanding an army of Talon Imass. Like, we need to keep her on side. You need to like bring Tattersail to the front so that we have, those folks on our side rather than on someone else's side, or just have them be this like uncontrollable chaotic force out there. They just don't know what the motivations are, and they're scared. They'd rather have them on their team. Ganos is like, all right, fine, lead me down there then. And Whiskey Jack's like, oh my God, maybe we should like promote you to commander just so that way you don't have an issue of getting in trouble for like bossing your superiors around or something. Classic Ganos. And then we get one of my favorite scenes of the whole chapter, and maybe one of my favorite scenes of the book, just because it's so like emblematic or symptomatic of the Bridgeburners, right? Because you get Picker and company going in to try and steal their table back, right? And it's just classic Bridgeburners. It shows like pick her as the leader. Clearly everybody's like deferring to her and she's the one calling the shots and whatever chain of command wise, but you also just get to see a lot of different personalities, right? They want to just like play games in the middle of this like totally serious like diplomatic meeting, right? That they're out dicking off trying to get a card game going and get their table back, right? And we find out that Hedge and Fiddler had kind of been cheating the whole time. We don't really know exactly how the mechanism works. Hedge tries to explain it. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's basically all, one big fix. And he's like, we can do it now to everybody else. We'll do it with Spindle now because Fiddler's gone. But it's hilarious, right? Because it wasn't just a full-on cheat. Obviously, Fiddler was doing something because Spindle can't replicate it, and they end up losing all their money, and like the whole crew goes bankrupt.
You blew it!
But then we do find out that maybe it isn't like Spindle's fault after all, right? Because there's this new card that's been painted on the bottom of the table, and that's what's been interfering with the game. And they don't know it's like a new card in the deck. We don't know much about it. I don't even think they say anything about it in this chapter other than it's like a Rivy, type of design, and it's red ochre, classic ochre. And that's about it. It's an Ascendant. They don't know who it is, but Spindle's like, dude, I got this. He's like, I'm going to copy this down and make my own version of this card. Then we could like charge for readings and I'll learn it. And then we'll get the game going again. And we'll win all our money back.
Promise, I got you guys.
Then we get Ganos' first meeting with Silver Fox, right? And he's got all kind of feelings going on. On the one hand, he's like super grossed out because she's a 9-year-old, but then he's also like tripped out because Night Chill is in there too, right? And her and Beludrin, or she had a companion, Beludrin, where she was clearly the one wearing the pants, the shot collar, if you will, and just super bossy. So he's tripped out about that. He also knows that Night Chill thinks she was betrayed at Pale, and so she's all bitter. And so like, how reliable of an ally is this even going to be? How much is Night Chill, who's all bitter and or like bossy on a personal relationship front, and how much is like Tattersail, who was his homegirl, who he was down for and smashing and whatever else. But they quickly they don't spend a lot of time hugging and kissing, right? They pretty quickly start talking about strategy in these Talon Imaths. She's like assuring him that they're not a threat, that they're just there because they need her, right? She's the first flesh and blood bone caster. She might not be the only flesh and blood bone caster, which somebody asked before, but she's the only one born in the last like 300,000 years. And so they need her for this benediction, this blessing. And in turn, she is going to use them in her war against this Panian Daemon. She tells Ganos, like, don't tell anybody. This is like between you and me. And he's like, why not? And she's like, because we're part of a much bigger thing that's going on here. We don't really know what that is, but she's like, trust, it's big. And we're both part of it. And Ganos asks her, like, do you know anything about this Hound's blood and me walking through the sword and all this stuff? And she tells him straight up, like, no, I don't know anything about that. But what I do know about is this thing called the Master of the Deck of Dragons. But then she gives what I think is one of the most comprehensive overviews of the magic system for us readers, maybe in all of the books combined. She talks about the Deck of Dragons and which is like the kind of tarot card reading system, and then the Warrens themselves, which is like kind of the overall magic system. And what her theory is that each card is kind of like a portal into a particular Warren, right? And that there's many more cards than we even know about now. There's many more Warrens than we even know about, or that are active, quote unquote, right now from years gone by. And there's all these old tiles and cards and things, and we saw this back in Deadhouse Gates, right? I think it was when like Culp and Heboric were going through that tunnel when they were going through the desert or whatever, and they saw like carved into the roof and ceiling and all these things, like all these cards that they had never seen before, and Heboric said those are like old tiles or whatever. And that's kind of the same thing that she's describing to Ganos here, right? And we see that she's making connections between the houses, right? Like the houses and the tiles all go to a particular warren, right? That's all aspected to a specific warren, and then she links all of that stuff to a particular Azath, right? So you have like a house of death with a king of high house death and a knight of death and a mason of death and all of that stuff, which is linked to the warren of death, right? Which is Hood's Path. Which is, the House of Death, which is linked to the Deadhouse, the Azath house over on Malaz Isle. So there's a Azath house for every active warren or hold or whatever. There's a house associated with that hold and warren and Azath, and it's linked to the actual warren itself, the place where all the magic is, and that's all kind of interconnected. She doesn't just talk about the dead house, right? She says that Tremorlor means like the house of life in Trellish or something, and that one then would be for like house life and the warren of life and all of that stuff. She talks about how when Shadow Throne and Cotillion ascended, they went in through the dead house in Malaz, but that one was already occupied, and so they found a way to take the throne of Shadow, right? And now there's presumably an Azath linked to Shadow Throne. But so they're all linked, right? These are all physical places, and they're connected through the Azath. And he doesn't know this. He didn't even know about Shadow Throne and Cotillion and whatever, right? But we knew it as readers, and we know it implicitly from Deadhouse Gates, right? Because we had when Fiddler and Mappo and Iskar all Pust and Crocus and all that went into Tremorlor, then they were walking through and they like fell through at different tiles, and that was kind of like wormholes or portal ways to specific geographic locations, some in our own world. Presumably, we saw those dragons in Deadhouse Gates when they were in there. They flew ahead of them and then plunged down through other tiles, going to like other worlds, presumably. And so everything we kind of know is interconnected. We knew that implicitly, and Silver Fox is just explaining that to us here more explicitly. This is all, of course, complicated by the fact that there's these kind of ascendant level characters, right? And what, my interpretation of her explanation is just that there's some like really G'd up characters that have like tons of power and access to all these warrens, or can really channel a lot of power out of these warrens, but they don't rise to the level of having actually like taken an Azath house or taken a throne that was associated with these houses that are found in the warren, and really like kind of taking control of a whole like warren itself, right? So you're totally G'd up, all these powers, can do all this gnarly stuff, but you don't necessarily have worshipers, and you don't control your own little dominion, and that's kind of what differentiates just being an ascendant from a god. And so that's why we see all these ascendant cards rising, is that there's all these new powerful characters out there. But basically we get it all kind of culminates in this idea that Dragnipor is kind of this it's a sword, but it's also the kind of portal way into the realm of darkness. And so in the same way that we saw back in like Deadhouse Gates, where there was like this wound that was connecting the nascent to like real life, right? And it was sucking in the ocean and flooding and all that stuff, and leaking in from Shadow and all that. In the same way that Lagana Breed, that like Talon Imatz dude who gave Stormy his sword and then flew up and used his soul to like seal that wound into the nascent, so too are all of these souls in Dragnipor being used to seal the portal way into elder darkness, right? And so when Ganos freed those two hounds, he kind of like put a couple of pinpricks in that seal, and now Tattersail or Silver Fox or whatever thinks that as a result of that, he has become this master of the deck of dragons. She's the one who painted his ascendant card on the bottom of the table, calling him Jenisan Rule or whatever, and calls him this ascendant, and says you need to figure out like what your purpose is, what part you're playing in all this. You need to get it figured out so that we can do the right thing or whatever. And he like rejects it. He's like, I'm the wrong choice. I'm ever the wrong choice. And he really doesn't want anything to do with it. She's like, dude, it doesn't matter if you want anything to do with it or not. She's like, I don't know if the Azath spun you out to for some specific purpose, but you definitely are here for a reason, and you need to find out what that is, and you're going to have a role to play whether you like it or not. He's like, I can't do it. We're already fighting this war. I'm trying to like take command of the Bridgeburners who might stab me in the back. We're fighting the Panian Daman. Now I've got to do all this. And she's like, it might all be part and parcel of one big giant war. Then, almost out of left field, she finds out that Ganos is having like all these crazy dreams and of a screaming kid. He doesn't know who the kid is. He like thinks he needs to run away because he's super freaked out by it. She's like, you need to run towards these screams. She's like, I don't know why, and I don't know what's going on. She's like, but you do. You just might not realize it yet. And then it kind of cuts to black on the chapter. So we'll go ahead and leave the summary stuff there. Thank you for watching. You have 20 seconds to bail out, and then we're going to start the spoilers. The spoilers is like the reason why I can't do more than one chapter at a time, because it just feels like every chapter of Memories of Ice is like so critically consequential. But I love the Buke storyline. Again, that's like right in my, that's squarely in my wheelhouse on the kind of gooey moral center characters, and just like how sad is it? But it's not just like a sad deal, right? It's like something where you can kind of totally empathize with, right? Because I've like done stuff in my life that I'm not like proud of, right? Where you like yell at the kids, or you make the kids cry, or you feel like crap about yourself because you're not like the best dad that you want to be or whatever. And you know, can you imagine then having your whole family die and that being like the last interaction? So you can just like really feel for Buke there. But I also think it's just like a great example of the character work, right? Because he gets criticized again for not doing good characters, but I really like identify and kind of sympathize, empathize with Buke. And here's a guy who doesn't say much. We never get much internal monologue. He doesn't necessarily have this really distinct like speaking style, and yet he's laid out like what I think is a three-dimensional character that hits you in all the right places, who you can like kind of identify with. I obviously don't work for necromancers. My family's not dead, but it still speaks to something about just like a regular old data nerd like me out living his life in like our own actual world. I also think it's like a great preview into Gruntle, right? Because we're learning all this through Gruntle. And I, again, think this is just a testament to Ericsson's stuff where, you know, here's this big, gruff, most badass caravan guard, right? But who's like actually a big softy. And we see this throughout, right? He's trying to like coach Stani and Harlow in the right direction and kind of doing it in his own way about caring for Buke. He just generally cares about like the people around him. And so it's kind of like an example of like what it means to be like a really actually strong dude, right? It's like the strong dude doesn't have to go around like with little dog syndrome, right? Like, you know, going off at the mouth and talking all this trash and stuff. When you can really beat everyone's ass, you don't have to talk trash, right? And so you don't get like the toxic part of it. He is definitely a badass and will just kick anyone's ass, but he's also like, you know, he had a chick. He's all got his feelings hurt because this chick left him. He's trying to help Buke and Stani and all that stuff. And so again, I just think it's a good model of what a strong male character actually should be. Yeah, they can beat your ass, but there's like all these other really dope, you know, protective, cool, caring, you know, in touch with his emotions elements to it too, and not afraid to like show emotion and stuff like that. So yeah, dope characters all around. The other thing I love about this chapter, and it kind of touches on something that 8P Canavan said in his interview with Philip, was how we as the readers always have like a little bit more context than the characters in the story themselves, and it always creates this kind of like interesting dynamic where you know more about what's going on than the characters themselves do. So like when they're talking about when Whiskey Jack and Corlat are talking about Silver Fox's origins, we know what that is all about. And same thing when Mallet is wondering like who in that camp could be an IMAS, right? Like we already knew, and that's just like a cool, I don't know if that's a literary device or whatever, but makes it kind of fun reading. The other thing, and I know I've keep beating a dead horse on this, and I didn't want to do too much, but I did want to bring it to the reader's attention because he did say it in there. But as I think people way underplay, like Tavor never gets her due. But if you look at these chapters in particular, like Ganos really is deferring to her judgment, trusting her to come up with the right plan. She gets a lot of shit for her abuse of Felicin and whatever, and for killing quote unquote her parents, which I'm still, I don't totally by. If you listen to what Dujek said, that the dad died and the mom committed suicide. If you listen to what Felicin says, Tavor's responsible for their death. I think she meant that more indirectly, like responsible for the declining health of the dad, which then caused the suicide of the mom. But I don't remember if there was a specific killing one. But either way, Ganos clearly is revering and deferring and putting Tavor up on a pedestal as being the better one. And so if it's good enough for Ganos and he can forgive her, like I think it's kind of funny that some of the readers still hold a grudge and can't forgive, even though Ganos himself was happy to.
Throw me a frickin' bone here.
But then again, like Ganos did say all that stuff about her ambition to Dujek, right? And so is it just like a good plan gone wrong? Really good intentions, which is obviously the camp that I'm in, or is she a more complex character and maybe not just the kind of purely good, but still had some like ego and like she was playing some individual chess? I think that the reason why she had to play it so close to the vest was because it would have blown up the spot for the Crippled God stuff, obviously, which was the real big plan. And so she was trying to like walk that tightrope of having those personal interests and rescuing her sister while, having to basically keep under wraps this whole bigger thing that they were doing. And I don't know why my lights keep turning off. What I also want to know your opinion on is all this like Shadow Throne and Dancer stuff, right? Because when Silver Fox is unveiling that to Ganos, she talks about how they were the only ones of all the Ascendants who wanted Lysine dead, and that they put in all these plans to kill off Lysine and all of that. And what I want to know is, did they like really truly want her dead, or was this like more about moving chess pieces around in a longer, bigger Crippled God-esque type of three-dimensional chess game, where they wanted to be able to set things in motion so that they could get into a position to be able to co-opt Lysine's army, so that they could co-opt soldiers like Callum and Fiddler and Sari and get all those pieces moving into place. Ganos like even says that as much, like ever since the day of that slaughter, his path has been set, Sari's path has been set. And so I'm curious whether this was like a kind of false start where they really were like overly obsessed on getting revenge on Lysine, or if it was kind of like a red herring bluff type of diversionary tactic that made him seem more petty to take their eye off the bigger prize of like, their whole grand scheme of rescuing the Warrens and freeing the Crippled God and all that stuff. Curious to know what you think about that. The last thing I want to know about is what's up with Ganos being the one to hear the Pantheon Seer's sister, right? Like, why does it have to be him, or what's the connection there? It seems like that's the part I'm not connecting the dots on. I get that it's just like foreshadowing for the fact that it's the Pantheon Seer's sister in there, and that they've got a rescuer, and that's all part of like, this grand strategy and whatnot. But why Ganos, or what's that all about? What am I missing there? All right, so we'll leave it there. It's already been a long video. I can tell I already recorded like 45 minutes. I don't know how much I'll be able to trim down for you guys to be able to enjoy, but thank you so much for watching. Look forward to the conversation. I've already planned out the next 2 chapters, so I'll try and record those back to back or tomorrow so that you get them in quick succession and get back on track. Like it, subscribe it. If you're not in the Discord, you're cheating yourself if you're watching all these spoilers and still not in there chatting with us. So join up, buy some merch, become a patron, and until next time, happy reading.